Hi, Joe Sallen here of the Sallen Coefficient. I'm going to be telling you my Sallen Coefficient entertainment efficiency rating as well as my own personal feelings about Hansa Teutonica, the quintessential cube pusher. Anyhow, Hansa Teutonica is a game where maybe you've seen it before and you've thought, whoa, what are people seeing in this game? Why is it rated so highly? Why is it so high on Board Game Geek? I'm going to hopefully give you a little bit of an idea of why I feel it deserves that spot, as well as give you an idea of how many decisions you get to make in a given second, which is its entertainment efficiency. That's the Sallen Coefficient, as well as my own personal feelings on the game. So there's going to be two separate ratings here, one for efficiency, one for my own thoughts. So, what is Hansa Teutonica? Well, in a way, if you've played Ticket to Ride, it's kind of like that where you're building routes. Only the routes in Hansa Teutonica are much more dynamic. You're going to be placing cubes out on the board, and then you're going to be removing those cubes to claim a route. So, just the placing of the cubes is something that other players can see. It's not like the cards in your hand where it's just like, boom, I take that, like you did in Ticket to Ride. Now you're actually able to watch routes get taken one piece at a time. Now, the other element to this game is once a route has actually been claimed and people have their contours placed, which is kind of how you get points in the game, you're still going to be able to take that over from other players. Or you're maybe going to want to use that ability to upgrade something and then maybe even give points to the player that owns that. So there's a lot of sort of push and pull back and forth that happens here that you don't see necessarily in Ticket to Ride, which is like, I took that route, it's over, sorry. So, Hansa Teutonica has a lot more, I would say, clever play, even though, when it comes down to it, it doesn't have that same sort of set collection and a lot of the simple vibrance that maybe sells Ticket to Ride to lighter gamers. Here in Hansa Teutonica, it's deliberate. There is no randomness in the game outside of a few little bits, those little bonus pieces, which are going to be very low impact on the game, and even the randomness of those tiles is very, very well balanced in the game systems. So, the other actions you can take in the game, one specifically I didn't really mention in my 60-second how to play, which is really difficult to cover everything, but it's about moving those cubes. You can move cubes using, especially once you've like blocked another player and they've had to pay cubes and then you get to benefit from that and then go somewhere adjacent, now you can actually make that production of cubes, which has already slowed down your opponent, useful to you by using what's called your book action to move those cubes around on the board. Now, that means that you're just going to be trying all that you can to be wherever other players want to be and be there one step earlier. You can even block a specific spot that you know they're going to want with that little disc, and it just gives you, like a little bit more leverage. It makes it a little bit more difficult for other players to get a hold of it. So, all of these different elements, the way that you're upgrading your different capabilities in the game, it's all something that's going to tailor your engine and tailor your style and your strategy towards getting the most points. I especially enjoy how when you upgrade something on those yellow cities, you're going to remove a cube that not only gives you that cube, but also that special ability. And those different special abilities are all really well impacted by other game systems, like the ability to get cubes more efficiently from the stock. Once you get that all the way upgraded, you just get to take them all. So you only really need to use that action like once or twice the entire rest of the game. It's almost kind of sad when you do that and you're like, oh, well, that's the only time I'm going to use that action now. The other actions, though, can be really, really impactful. And specifically, I'm talking about the actions. And I know I've used the word action a lot, but you're limited in this game to only 2 actions at the start of the game. Until you get that extra cube and upgrade that ability to get the 3rd action, and then you continue, staggering it where the next upgrade won't give you another action, but the one after that will give you the 4th, and finally the 5th after a couple more. It's really, really tough to catch up with a player that has got extra actions before other players, unless that player has had to fight tooth and nail for those actions. This is an issue that specifically impacts the base game of Hansa Teutonica. In the base game of Hansa Teutonica, you really can end up with a player running away if they have a more efficient ability to manipulate cubes, produce cubes, get them from the stock, and put them out on the board. And it just kind of ends up ramping up. And I feel that the game systems that are in the base game force players to really be conscious of what's best, meaning your first game of Hansa Teutonica with experienced players could feel quite frustrating and you could feel like you're in over your head. Now, that's something that I feel is fixed, but it's certainly worth mentioning. So the specific balance of the different actions and upgrades in the base game is a bit problematic to newer players. Once you understand it, though, you end up blocking players where they should be blocked, and that way no player is just going to run away with the game because one action was awesome and other players couldn't do anything. You really have so much interaction going on in this game that with experienced players, anything that I'm mentioning isn't that much of an issue, but it certainly is a hurdle that's going to be part of your learning process in Hansa Teutonica. That's going to be one of the main things that impacts the Sallen Coefficient rating, aside from just how simple and elegant and impactful every decision you'll make is in this game and how quick you can really make it. This is, in my opinion, one of the most efficient, without any fat on a system, Euro games I have ever played. That's why people criticize it as being like a cube pusher. Yes, it's a cube pusher. Certainly there could have been other themes attached to it, and there even was talk for a while there of making this like mafia themed, which I totally get that. But it would just add potentially more to get caught up in and more that's not necessarily going to impact in terms of the gameplay itself. So, what is the Sallen Coefficient for Hansa Teutonica? I'm going to actually give a couple of different ratings for that. And that's because if you're only playing with the base game, I can only recommend it at a level of a 7. That means it's a good game. But I think that it has a little bit of space that it needs to grow before it really is something I would say great for your first game. And that's because you really need to be fighting and contesting the ability to get more actions. Otherwise, players can just really run away with it and be taking tons and tons more actions and just really kind of bury you. Now, if you are playing with specifically the Britain expansion, the extra action spot has been turned into a much more dynamic and interesting spot that is tougher to get and has more ways to get it, and other actions, specifically like the privilege action, the ability to place your contours in more than just your starting areas, that gets much more powerful in that expansion. And there's other spots on the board that allow you to sort of bypass and get powerful actions without necessarily just taking that action spot, because I feel like that action spot is just really what you should go for hard in the base game. At least upgrade it once, otherwise you have very little chance of doing very well. So, overall, my thoughts on the base game of Hansa Teutonica are that it's a 7, and with the expansion, the Britain expansion, it is an 8. The East expansion is kind of something different, and it doesn't really, in my opinion, change the rating of the base game that much. And I'm not that experienced with it. It wasn't something I necessarily took to, but the Britain expansion to me certainly seemed like it was much in line with what I loved about the base game, and it actually improved upon that in many ways. So, those are the Sallen Coefficient entertainment efficiency ratings, and now what's my own thoughts about Hansa Teutonica? Well, I have a very subjective and reactive opinion on Hansa Teutonica. I hear it get a lot of crap from people because of its box art, because it's soulless. And when I hear a lot of those things, I think what happens in me is it just fortifies that sort of feeling that no, this is not something that you should sell short. Sell it based on looks alone. This is a game that deserves your attention. It's going to reward you in gameplay. It's going to reward you in interaction with other players. And that's what I'm playing for. The fact that it looks like this, that it looks like, you know, a stern-looking man in the Middle Ages with, hey, it's the game board in the background. That's kind of cool. But yeah, I've always told people and heard that it's, you know, it's better if you imagine that he's not wearing any pants, that he's like, oh. So anyway, think about that next time that somebody tells you that this looks like it's a really boring game. So anyhow, what I feel about this game, though, is that each of those ratings, the Sallen Coefficient gets bumped up a notch in my own personal mind, because when I see this, I see this sort of charm of a dry game. I don't want to say dry necessarily, but just a game that's not trying to sell me on, say, a sales pitch, or sell me on an explosion, or sell me on a cool trailer. I feel like this is a game that's selling me on the quality of its interaction, of its gameplay, of its clever mechanisms, and that's why, for me, Hansa Teutonica gets, with its Britain expansion, which is one of my favorite games of all time, a rating of a 9 in my personal book. So, anyway, that is the Sallen Coefficient, my personal feelings for Hansa Teutonica. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. I hope you also check out my 60-second how to play videos. It's not really that useful, but it's kind of fun to see that done. That's my thinking with that. And I hope that you'll subscribe to the channel and check out more Sallen Coefficient video reviews. Thanks a lot to my sponsor, Game Surplus. Check them out at GameSurplus.com, where Carmen and Elaine are bringing the world of board games to you.